What is going on, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Brandon Sylvia. If you're new, consider subscribing. So today I'm joined by my brother, Mr. Moan Dane. How you doing, dude?
Pretty good. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. I have my laptop over here and my camera there, so I'm going to be looking here at my laptop because that's how communication works. But we are going through today and we're going to be going over our favorite games starting in 2000 all the way up to 2021, given our game of the year for each year, talking about kind of the year in general for some of the big heavy hitter years. And yeah, but Mondane, first thing I want to do, man, is I want to plug your YouTube channel, Mondane Designs, over on the good old YouTubes. Link will be in the description below. Anything you want to tell the good people about your channel?
Just me trying to be an old gamer and like help as many people as I can. Take the fear out of any kind of collecting. Um, you know, I want more people playing video games.
For sure. Yeah, and that's the vibe that he's always given me, just a real good dude. So I like collaborating with you, like discussing games with you, and you have a lot of knowledge on on the hobby. So I always appreciate the conversations with you, brother. Well, man, I am going to go ahead and let you kick this thing off, starting with the year 2000. What is your GOTY for the year 2000?
So I got really excited when you contacted me about this, and I immediately started researching it and stuff. And I pulled up the year 2000 and stopped on the first game that I read, and didn't even consider other games or anything like that. So it's got to be Chrono Cross because it's Squaresoft, it's an epic tale. You have wonderful combat, you have a very in-depth story where you can, decide very, very heavy topics, like you get to decide whether a certain character dies or not. And that goes all the way through the game, and you have to play through it a second time to even get that character back. And it was just a really heavy hitter for me. The music still gives me chills every time I hear it when I've got the soundtrack going and stuff.
Yeah.
It just ingrained in my mind as one of the greats.
Yeah, yeah, and just crazy, crazy, crazy time for JRPGs, man. So many heavy hitters around that period with the PS1, and I know Chrono Cross is one of the more beloved ones out there. But diving into my I had 2000, I have a lot. So Tony Hawk 2 was huge for me in 2000 with my buddies, with some family members. I was always awful at it, but I loved playing it. Resident Evil Code Veronica, my favorite Resident Evil story of all time. WWF No Mercy, just the tightest feeling gameplay in a wrestling game ever. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, so damn fun, so simple but so fun. Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1. Great nostalgic title. And The Sims. The first Sims. I loved the first Sims game, man. I just like creating my character and then, managing their little lives. It's not something I can play anymore. I haven't played The Sims in a long time, but man, The Sims 1 and 2, I really connected with and just loved those games. But my game of the year for the year 2000, Crash Bash. Not the best Crash game on the market. I wouldn't debate anybody about that, but my favorite. So many memories I have with my uncle who has passed away, and then just playing the hell out of Crash Bash. Just I love those levels, man. I love the air hockey little thing. I love the pogo sticks, and just there's so many fun little boss fights, and just being able to sit down. And I actually played through probably about 4 hours straight with a buddy not even 2 years ago. And it holds up incredibly well for that style of game, because there's not a lot of really polished, well-made games that are just all based around mini games.
Yeah, it's definitely about that experience with family and friends and stuff, and uh, that adds so much more meaning to some of the games that you're playing.
No doubt, especially because I would have been 6 years old at the time. So the 2000 was a big year. Like a lot of the earlier 2000, like 2001 to like 5. I'm gonna have at least one or two mentions of some games that are just, deeply connected to me playing it with buddies and family members and shit. But what you got for the year 2001 for me?
Well, 2001, I've got Golden Sun, uh, great JRPG, but it's not my pick. Twisted Metal Black, it's another great game, but not my pick. Uh, Halo Combat Evolved.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that thing was phenomenal. Again, not my pick. Castlevania Circle of the Moon. Uh, Another Metroidvania, one of the better ones that's available on handheld systems. SSX Tricky and Devil May Cry. But out of all of those, the one that I'm going to pick is going to be SSX Tricky. And it's for the same reason you picked your Crash Bash. I played SS Tricky with my friends. It was all about a community style experience. We played almost every weekend with that game and a couple of other games too. But the one that was big was SSX Tricky. We each picked a character and we loaded onto a community memory card, and you could copy the memory card, take it home and play the game and practice. But when you came back for competition at the weekend, you had to play what was on the memory card. So if you had unlocked something, you had to go back and unlock it again. But it was so much fun. It was so like that good spirited competitiveness where, you're not just rooting for yourself to win, you're also rooting for your friends to like get a higher score and like for everyone to just elevate their game that much more.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I never really thought about that, but that is kind of like, even though with Tony Hawk it can get competitive, but it's still, there's something about like those early 2000s extreme sports games where a lot of it's about just watching what's going to take place from moment to moment and seeing what your friend can pull off that you've never pulled off. And like that is very true with SSX, where you get into that flow where you watch a friend who's really in that flow and you're like, oh man, they're rolling right now.
Yeah. I miss EA big.
So much, dude. So
I wish
much.
they would come back.
And right on to that, I have one here. It's not my game of the year, but NBA Street, man. NBA Street was so important. Shouldn't say important, that's over dramatic, but it was so, I loved that game so much. Getting to like boot it up and have Michael Jordan as like your first character going into the story mode. And I just loved NBA Street. The first one in particular. The other games, I don't know what happened. I know most people love Volume 2, but for me, Volume 1 was it. I just played Volume 1 over and over and over again. Onimusha Warlords, incredible game. I have SSX Tricky on my list as well. Silent Hill 2, incredibly gross, disturbing, messed up horror game. Max Payne. Let's see. Devil May Cry, I have that on my list as well. GTA 3, another honorable mention. But for me, my game of the year for 2001, I have to go Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 2 was, I loved the first one so much, but that story in Metal Gear Solid 2 just, it blew my mind and changed the way that I looked at video game narratives. And especially like if you look at Metal Gear Solid 2's story today and the impact that it's having today, just culturally, and the weird ties to social media and what they're talking about with social media without directly saying social media, but like, man, there was a lot of just foresight. And I know people would talk about Hideo Kojima, seeing the future, this and that and all, but like not, I'm not going that conspiracy. Like I'm not saying that. I don't have the tinfoil hat on to that degree, but there is a level of like, holy shit, how did you see this, man?
He's a genius. Like it's unbelievable some of the things that he's pulled off. And then again, like you said, the foresight is just unprecedented for someone like that.
No doubt. Yeah, he's a, it gets thrown around all the time, but he's like really one of the true like innovative auteurs in this space. He's a truly special mind. But yeah, and even the gameplay in Metal Gear Solid 2, I don't want to just graze past that. There was a lot of improvements from the first one to the second that just made it like you can go back to Metal Gear Solid 2 today and it holds up fairly well. And yeah, I one, two, and three, I love all of those. We'll talk about three in a little bit, but two is it weirdly enough my favorite Metal Gear Solid game. Let's go on to 2002. What you got for me? What was kicking around in your brain for 2002?
So kicking around in my brain was Metroid Prime, Eternal Darkness. And that's one that you probably hit you too. That Jet Set Radio Future, but the one that brought it home for me was Ratchet and Clank.
Okay, the OG.
Yeah, the OG Ratchet and Clank. I love Ratchet and Clank. I I love the ridiculousness of the weapons, the campy story, um, just and the combat is so much fun, and just shooting something with like the sheepinator and suddenly they become a sheep and they can't hurt you anymore. They just kind of bounce around. Just the level of absurdity to where it just becomes a true comedy
Yeah.
is just great. And you know my favorite weapon was Mr. Zircon because of everything that he would say. Mr. Zircon does not have feelings. He will hurt you. Just all kinds of absolutely insane stuff that he would say. And I remember just playing it with my friends and stuff, and we were just cackling about like the horrible ways that we would dispatch all of the enemies.
Yeah, the
That's a
Ratchet.
little sadistic, but it's still fun.
No, yeah, and that is you saying that brings to mind for me like it's weird that Ratchet and Clank, it seemed to kind of get a little bit more tame. And I'm not a huge Ratchet and Clank guy, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to get a little bit more tame over time. Whereas those first couple games, like even the titles, Up Your Arsenal, and like all these different titles that had, some tongue in cheek humor tied to it, like a lot of that stuff started getting removed. And yeah, I wonder what happened with that, or were the games, because like I didn't play the first Ratchet and Clank I ever played was actually for the PlayStation 5. So I have no real experience with any of those earlier games. Were they like more crude with their humor, the earlier ones?
Yes. It was part of the Tude era, kind of a throwback to the Attitude era and stuff. And um, you got to think it's 2002, and they're kind of the Ratchet and Clank games kind of mirrored what was happening in professional wrestling a little bit.
Okay.
So how they push the boundaries is how this game was also pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, and that was actually you saying that that was just sort of a cultural, like it felt like almost everything was on the same playing field, where it was just everything was a little bit more chaotic, and then it sort of toned down a little bit. So I guess that makes sense for Ratchet and Clank to be in that realm as well. But that's your goatee for 2002, Ratchet.
Yeah, Ratchet and Clank.
Nice.
Hard lock on that one.
For me, 2002 was a huge year. Resident Evil Zero, not one of the more popular Resident Evil games. I adored Resident Evil Zero. I loved switching back and forth between the characters. I know that's a lot of people really despise that about the game, and the inventory management, and then really a difficult Resident Evil title. But I really had a blast with Zero. Jet Set Radio Future, like you said. Sly Cooper, that was for the PS2 era mascot platformer game. Sly Cooper was the one that I dove into the heaviest. Mafia, the first Mafia game, I love that story so much. The remake is, I mean, chef's kiss, dude. It's so good. I would highly recommend anybody who played that first Mafia game and kind of got bounced out of it because of mechanics or whatever, go back and play the remake. It just polishes up all that stuff. And yeah, Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, phenomenal game, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later year. But my game of the year for 2002 is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. This was everything to me when this came out. And like we talked about earlier with GTA 3 being an honorable mention, GTA 3 was the groundbreaker. It was the one that showed you, like, okay, it's possible to have a game that almost feels like it has no boundaries. Vice City took that to a totally, totally different level, man. Vice City, you could just live in that world for days and days and days and never get bored. And just the tone and the vibe of that Miami aesthetic, and just that's one that today, to this day, if you said like you can have whatever 5 games and go sit on an island for the rest of your life, Vice City's one of those games for me, because it's, and I'm not saying it's like in my top 5 favorite games of all time, but it's just those worlds that they created, that Rockstar created in the early 2000s. Those were my favorite open worlds ever, with San Andreas, which we'll talk about once again, and Vice City. Those worlds, man, are so synonymous with my youth. I loved existing in those playgrounds.
So you would call that this game has endless amounts of fun.
Endless amounts of fun, man. And like with the different kind of, and there's some difficult stuff in Vice City, but the fun kind of overrides it for me. Like the properties that you're getting to go and buy up, and just those little things that those little slight improvements. Of course, you're talking about a 1 year turnaround, where GTA 3 2001, Vice City 2002. So they're using a lot of the same assets, obviously, but it just, those slight little tweaks to the gameplay, the slight little tweaks to the driving, the shooting, and then, that setting is really what takes it to the next level, where like you're getting to live that Miami Vice, drug running lifestyle. It was just, it was so fun as a kid, especially when, like you said, the culture at that time was so crazy, and Grand Theft Auto was an embodiment of that crazy culture at the time. But on into '03, man. What you got for me in 2003?
Well, 2003 was another pretty stacked year, especially for me. Playing with my friends as much as we could and stuff. We'd all run off to different colleges and stuff, but Mario Kart Double Dash, KOTOR, SSX3, obviously, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, F-Zero GX. I absolutely loved the speed in that game.
Yeah.
That feeling of speed. But the one that locked it in for me, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I'm a big RPG guy. I love Squaresoft, and Final Fantasy Tactics, the original one on the PlayStation, was very, very big for me. And we had been the community, and yes, it was a community of people who played that game religiously and picked it apart and did insane things with it. We were looking for a sequel. We were hungry for a sequel. We found other games like Karsha and the Word of Fate to try to simulate that game. We tried playing Tactics Ogre, which is being re-released on the PS4 and the PS5 this year or next year. And even though it came close, it was not Final Fantasy Tactics. And then this game came out, and not only was it Final Fantasy Tactics and back in the same world and everything, they had improved things, they had changed things. It was portable, and it was multiplayer. And it was everything we asked for.
Yeah.
And on a little GBA cart, and still having like a slamming soundtrack for a little tactical game like that. It was just so good. And it was like feeding a starving man a steak.
Yeah. Hungry for that style of gameplay experience.
Yes.
No, I definitely do feel that. Like you said, 2003 is a crazy year. It's so stacked. Def Jam Vendetta, the first Def Jam game. Once again, EA big. Shout out to early 2000s, mid 2000s, EA big. rest in peace. What the hell happened there? Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. That's the one that we were talking about Outcast earlier. Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. I thought just had some of the most brilliant lightsaber play I'd ever seen in a Star Wars game. It's incredible. The Simpsons Hit and Run, pretty much Grand Theft Auto. So you're scratching that itch with me having freaking Grand Theft Auto, but the Simpsons characters, you can't beat that. Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil, that was one I actually played in my adult years. And I was very surprised about the amount of different things you could go and do. Like you could go and like do these little races, and you had I think it was air hockey. Once again, I keep talking about air hockey for some reason, but I believe there was an air hockey mini game in Beyond Good and Evil, and there was just like these little hub areas where like it felt like this living, breathing world, and you could just go and roam around, and a deceptively deep story. But Beyond Good and Evil is very, very underrated, and I think more people should check it out. Unfortunately, I don't know if we're ever going to get that. I guess it's technically a prequel, but I don't think we're ever going to get Beyond Good and Evil 2 because Ubisoft is wild. KOTOR, you mentioned it. KOTOR, incredible RPG. Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 is my favorite of the Silent Hill games I've played so far. It's just, whoa, man, what they do with heights. I'm not even scared of heights, but what they do with heights is so impressive. Tony Hawk's Underground, my personal favorite Tony Hawk game. Having the ability to, like, for one, having an open world, but being able to like get off your board was so innovative, and I just couldn't believe you were able to do that in the game. And actually having a real story, it was really cool. But for me, number one, SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain. It was everything that Shut Your Mouth was, just much, much better. And the thing that'll always stick out in my head is pulling off the finishing moves and seeing the camera sort of pan around. Like you would hit a finishing move and it would have these like cinematic cuts to the camera, and just little things like that really elevated it to just make it so memorable and so fun. The gameplay loop felt so fun, and it still had that arcadey, actiony experience where you could pull off anything that your crazy, depraved brain could dream up. But it was still like, it still felt, I shouldn't say but semi enough to where you could like watch that going on and be like, man, that's close enough to what actually happens, week to week on television. Just such a great game.
So would you say that was like another emotional attachment to it, is where you were like playing with friends and stuff?
Honestly, not a ton with that one. I would say for whatever reason, Def Jam Vendetta brings back more memories with friends than Here Comes the Pain. Here Comes the Pain, I definitely did play with friends, but I've always kind of like, I've been a season mode guy forever. Even when I was a kid with wrestling games, I just really, really liked playing the season modes in wrestling games. But something like Def Jam Vendetta, I felt like it was so accessible because I would have a lot of friends come over who didn't play wrestling games a lot, and there's a lot of intricacies with especially the WWE wrestling games at that time, and if you weren't good at those, you would just get demolished by people who played them. But with something like Def Jam Vendetta, you could pick up items from the crowd would have items, you grab a friggin' whatever, a stop sign, or smash it over the head of the dude you're playing with. So there was an accessibility and approachability there that sometimes wasn't there if you were playing someone who was really dedicated to Here Comes the Pain or whatever. But into 04, man, what you running with me?
2004. I'm gonna have a couple of weird ones here. So R-Type final, it's the first shmup that's actually hit my list. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube, just playing with friends and stuff. Growlancer Generations, and that's one that everyone's just going to be like, huh, what? It's like, it's a Working Designs game. It is.
Okay.
It was their very last game that they made, and it came with everything. It came with a soundtrack. It came with 2 games. It came with a wristwatch. It came with a ring. It came with a necklace. It came with playing cards. It is ridiculous.
Nice.
But that's just the way Working Designs is. But my game of the year for 2004 is actually Halo 2. And it's because I worked at a local comic book shop. And one of the things we did was we ran tournaments with Halo 2. And I remember the release of Halo 2, where all the stores started breaking street date by like a good week. And people started canceling their pre-orders at other stores that wouldn't give them out early and taking all of their money and just going down the street and picking up their copy of Halo 2 like a week early. And it got way out of hand really fast. Microsoft got called in. There was some sort of like press release about it or something like that. It was chaotic, but it's a great game. They definitely improved on the story style of the game, where you're just going through, and it's definitely more story driven. It's no longer like, hey, I'm just here to shoot bad guys and make their heads explode.
Right.
But being able to dual wield weapons, so you could have two pistols, or two of the SMGs or something, and just it was a really, really good game. And then on top of that, like running tournaments where there are 4 televisions and 4 Xboxes, and each Xbox had 4 players on it. And it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just the huge number of LAN parties and stuff like that happened just because of that game.
That's what I was about to say. It just, in terms of what it did for like the LAN parties and then the multiplayer scene at that time, there was nothing quite like that. That was, it was groundbreaking. And even as like, I wasn't an Xbox kid until I was older, like I remember really feeling the FOMO with that one. That was one where I was like, I would really like to be playing some damn Halo 2, just because it was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. It was huge, man. 2004 for me. I'm trying to figure out what on the list to even mention. 2004, I think for me, just personally, is my favorite year of game releases ever. It's just nuts. Chronicles of Riddick, Tony Hawk Underground 2, Resident Evil Outbreak, The Suffering, Red Dead Revolver, Burnout 3, Fable, Fight for New York, Spider-Man 2, Half-Life 2. But it gets down to these 3 games, and it's really tough. It's not tough, but it's tough to come up with the number 2, I guess I should say. NFL 2K5 is my favorite sports game, I think, ever. It is the perfect simulation football game. I will go to my grave believing that if EA hadn't have got the exclusive simulation football deal for for Madden going forward from that point on, then they could have been in real trouble if 2K had stayed around. But wasn't the case, and we see what's going on now with NFL games. Not the greatest. Metal Gear Solid 3. It was, in terms of like a feature rich experience, so just dense with new features in that game that it still keeping the story intact, still keeping all of those, great elements that you love from the first 2 games. The gameplay's tremendous, but it's so much more open than, having to take care of your wounds and having to eat and going and killing snakes, and like the incredible game. But for me, this is probably for the listener out there, not the most fun thing to hear, but Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. No, Vice City had it for my game of the year 2002. I can't sit here and lie to you, though. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is my favorite game of the year 2004. I love CJ as a character. I think that it's, you have Samuel L. Jackson in the game. You have a incredible reveal halfway through where you realize you have a whole new open world to explore that's pretty much just Las Vegas. It's an insane game. I love the just side activities you can go and do. And that's the one thing I will say about like Vice City and the GTA 3, as great as they were, the side activities with those open worlds weren't even close to the level of the side activities with San Andreas. Going and working out, going and shooting pool, you had the arcade, you're going like just so much to do in that game. I love San Andreas so much. For sure, my favorite game of the year 2004. All right. So, what you got for me for the year 2005?
So 2005 was kind of a light year for me. KOTOR 2 came out, which again, I like KOTOR 1, give me more. So KOTOR 2 showed up and gave me more. I was happy. Then I wanted more. I still haven't seen KOTOR 3. Um, and then the one that locked it in for me was God of War. I loved the combat system. It just kind of spoke to me, and it's one of those games where it enjoys making the player feel like a badass. Um, like like Spy Hunter on the PlayStation 2, it makes you feel like a badass. Some of the early fighting games and stuff. But yeah, God of War definitely makes you feel like a badass. You are doing these impossible things. You are putting in just enough effort to make it feel like you have some agency in the game and that you are able to affect the story and progress the story and earn new things, create new combos, unlock all kinds of stuff. It was unbelievable and just a great story, a very cinematic style of like music with it and stuff. And it was so over the top and rewarding for the player.
Yeah, God of War is definitely one of my honorable mentions as well. Like I think that you hit the nail on the head with just like Devil May Cry obviously introduced that structure, the whatever character action game, whatever you want to call it, but it Devil May Cry always had a tinge of difficulty that God of War it was difficult, don't get me wrong, but it really did just it relished in making you feel like a total badass. And I absolutely, yeah, I agree. I appreciate the hell out of God of War for just leaning into being like, yeah, you know what? You're a badass and just embracing it. For me, 2005 still really stacked. Jade Empire very high up on my honorable mentions list. X-Men Legends or X-Men Legends 2 would have been 2005, and Ultimate Spider-Man was also 2005. So two really good superhero games that I loved that year. Another Rockstar game, Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition. Fantastic racing game with an incredible soundtrack. Another wrestling game, SmackDown versus Raw 2006. My favorite mode in the history of video games is actually in that game with the GM mode. It was just something that I could play endlessly with friends, and we would, squad up 2-on-2 and build our own shows and hire storyline writers and try to get the best ratings each week. It was incredibly fun. I still play it on a regular basis. Phantom Dust, incredible title. But for me, 2005, number one, I got to go with Resident Evil 4. Change the game. It really did. And it's not even, this isn't my favorite style of Resident Evil game. I can't even necessarily say that I think what it did to change the game was in the long term to the benefit of the franchise. I don't know if I would even say that, because you look at RE5, RE6, it starts to go downhill a little bit after RE4. And RE4's success with the action focus is a little bit responsible for that. But what it did for the third person shooter genre in general, I think more than makes up for what it did to hurt Resident Evil. That success that it had with that over the shoulder perspective, and, just having a character, having a up close character like that, where you really felt the horror coming at you whenever, because it was still locking you in where you couldn't move. but to be able to closely over the shoulder aim that gun and pinpoint accuracy, pick off the enemies. That was so crucial for, developing that new hold L2 to aim, hold R2 to fire. Like Resident Evil 4, it was crucial for building in that thing that just became standard in third person shooters from that point on. But on in to the year that was 2006, we are just getting our new next gen hardware at this time with our PS3, our 360. I want to know what in the year 2006 tickled your beard.
Older games. So I loved Outrun 2006. It was beautiful, great music, wonderful arcadey style play, all that stuff. But it was Castlevania Portrait of Ruin that locked it in for me. And
Okay.
it was just the way that it all came together. I love all of my Castlevanias. I really enjoyed like all the old school NES Castlevanias. I was really bad at them. And I didn't start getting good at Castlevania until like Symphony of the Night. But Portrait of Ruin just kept on taking it further and further and further into territory that I was enjoying. So of course, it's definitely my game of the year for 2006.
Hell yeah, dude. That's 2006. It's a okay year. There's some okay stuff in here, but 2006 isn't a super heavy hitter year for me personally. Let's see, I have Scarface on here, which I do like Scarface a lot. I have a lot of enjoyment and nostalgia for that game. I have Bully on here. Bully is definitely close to getting in to that number one spot for me. Weird enough, I have The Godfather and Scarface both releasing in 2006. I didn't even notice that until I'm just now looking at it. Two games that that was the only video game tie, or well, you had The Godfather too, but nothing else from the Scarface or Godfather universe since then, and they both released in 2006. So very strange. But for me, number one, once again, talking about open world crime games, Saints Row 1. Just finished playing Saints Row 1 actually, for like replaying it just like literally 2 nights ago. I can't believe that game holds up as well as it does with its storytelling. The story in Saints Row 1 is so good, and it's a much smaller scale, and it's more gritty and grounded with everything, even the way that the mission structure is laid out, to where it's a lot of just going in sort of hostile takeover of enemy buildings, and it's just more gang warfare, street level stuff. And I appreciate that grittiness of it. I forgot how, like, there's things I don't like about Saints Row 1. I think that having to go off and do the little side activities to get to the next mission every single time could be redundant and repetitive, especially how Saints Row 2, it really took the side activities to the next level. And it felt like you were just waiting to go off and do all the different fun. You had the where you could ride in the helicopter and then shoot at people. Like there's different shit going on the ground, and you're taking people out in Saints Row 2. There was so much different, the fuzz missions where you're impersonating a police officer and going around, crazy stuff in Saints Row 2 with the side activities. The first game didn't have it on that level with side activities, so it felt redundant, but the actual story was just so good. It made me appreciate this game on a whole different level. So Saints Row 1 is taken GOTY for me for 2006 for sure. But on in to 07, I feel like we're gonna have a couple similar hitters on here. What you got for me for 07?
I don't know. I've got a couple of curveballs here.
Okay.
So Wii Sports.
Nice.
Just it's one of the honorable mentions. It's not my lock-in for it, but it's 2007, hanging out with my friends. We're all drinking and playing Wii Sports, and it was one of those games where it was like, if you won whatever we were playing, if that was bowling, if that was boxing, or any of the other sports in Wii Sports, if you were the winner, you took a shot.
Oh, the winner.
The winner took a shot
Nice
because
twist.
it was King of the Hill style. Is you kept taking shots until you were too drunk to win anymore,
Oh,
and then other people got to drink.
that's a great twist. Yeah, that actually makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, because I mean, like, if the loser keeps drinking, the guy who's winning is just gonna keep winning and never. Yeah,
Yeah, mopping the floor with everybody. We've
yeah.
never done that, but that actually makes a ton of
See,
sense.
just flip it on its head, see how it works.
Yeah, punishment for being too damn good. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. It's your handicap.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Heck yeah.
uh, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. Uh, Great story, great way to get introduced to the PlayStation 3. It was their killer software. It was there to showcase. Now, I'll admit that the engine was very rough back then. And even on my channel, when I review this game, I mention how the engine is way too rough to the point where if I had to do hand-to-hand combat, I'd just start the mission over.
You actually, when you pointed that out on your channel, that was I mean, I thought about that, but it never really hit my brain until I think you referenced Uncharted 3 as being what you thought was the best melee combat. And I was like, damn, you're so right that it really was a bit archaic until 3. 3 put it over the top with that melee combat. And it's something that doesn't get appreciated enough.
Yeah, I mean, it was, we definitely got to watch the evolution of the engine through all of Uncharted.
Definitely.
But my lock was Halo 3.
Okay.
Again, just they started hitting it out of the park with story, swapping back and forth, all this other craziness and stuff. And of course, Halo 3 got to introduce my favorite game of all for the Halo series, but it's definitely not going to be in any of my Game of the Year stuff, is Halo 3 ODST.
Okay.
Because you're dropped into the Halo universe and you're not a Spartan. So grab your boots and start running.
Yeah, and the thing I like about this is that we're just, you don't know my list, I don't know your list, and we're being just totally honest. Like, it would be definitely a lot more interesting to change up mine from San Andreas to something else. That way Grand Theft Auto isn't littering the list. But at the end of the day, if what you played, if it was Halo 2 and then Halo 3, if it was GTA Vice City, then GTA San Andreas, and those were the things that click with you, then that's just what it is. You can't, you can't lie. It's
you like what you like.
You like what you like, and there's something special about, like, if it is a series and a couple entries. Like, I'm so curious to follow along with your list going forward to see where some of the other Halos are going to come up, because I know that 3 is generally considered the last of, like, the golden age of Halo games. And I don't even want you to spoil anything for me for your list going forward, but you'll see a similar thing with me in Grand Theft Auto. Like, there's a drop off point, there's a real drop off point. And not that the games got bad with Grand Theft Auto. It's just in terms of, like, my experience with them and my enjoyment with them, it started to change where that wasn't what I was gravitating to as much. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm going to be very curious to see if Halo pops back up on your list, but don't spoil it for me. Don't spoil it.
Yeah.
So we are in what this is a year that it's just one game for me. I can definitely mention, like you said, Uncharted, love Uncharted, love Heavenly Sword, God of War 2, which is crazy that came out in 2007 and I believe was exclusive for the PlayStation 2. That's absolutely bizarre. I don't know how they were able to work that in. I guess because the PS2 had like 100+ million units, already a built-in audience of that, so you kind of want to keep it there. But weird that it didn't go to the PS3, but I guess you could backward, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You could play it through backwards compatibility. But my game of the year for 2007 is Mass Effect 1, by, like, not even close to close. There's nothing on here. Like, there's other games. Shout out to BioShock. Shout out to there's other games, but Mass Effect 1 is the pinnacle of like, it's what got me into role playing games on a much much deeper level. I like messing around with character trees. I liked dialogue decisions. I liked all these things. I liked character customization, but I never felt like I really had agency in a game and that a game was responding to what I was doing quite on that level. Mass Effect 1 was just, it catapulted what I knew was possible with role playing games. It made me just so aware of this whole different universe that I'd never really experienced before. And just talking about character dynamics and the relationships that you're getting to build with Ashley and Garrus, and it just the whole Krogan species that you're getting to learn about. And it beautiful game. I'm not gonna lie, it has dated mechanics, but it's still for sure my favorite Mass Effect.
I mean, so hitting on that a little bit, it's one of the first games where uh, it had a type of experience based on your dialogue choices. Like you gained renegade points and kept gaining renegade points for talking and choosing like a renegade. Or you could be the good guy, go the opposite direction, or middle of the road, and then it would, and you kind of got punished for that too, because you know, you didn't get to do like the big intimidation thing, or the I'm going to use my reputation to kind of like make you agree with me, because who's not going to agree with the savior of the universe and stuff. And this was like one of the first times that they really made that affect you long term in the game.
100%.
um
you
but they
you're
could have cut the Mako out.
Yeah, no, you're right. And if I would say to anybody, if you are going to Mass Effect 1 right now, if you want to restart it, just jump into the remastered package, because the Mako
Yeah.
runs so much better in the remastered package. But no, you're definitely right. And especially with 2, I felt that, the Paragon and Renegade stuff got a little bit too much, to the point where it didn't feel like I was shaping anything in the gray area, where it was like all either Paragon, Renegade committing to that. And I also felt that in Dragon Age 2. So it's interesting that BioWare, with their second entry in a franchise, they get a little bit out of the gray area and want you to kind of focus on either a good or bad. I wonder exactly what causes that. Not, and, but regardless, it's just, with that first game, it opened the door to role playing games for me in a level that I haven't looked back since. And I try to play everything that's like a action RPG, like real time action RPG at this point. So
Yeah.
shout out to Mass Effect for shining the light on my dumb Western third person shooter kind of skull. But what you got for 2008?
Okay, so again, I'm just going to go through some honorable mentions and touch on them a little bit. This first one, I am going to absolutely butcher the name, and it's Triggerheart Excella. I think that's how you say it. I could be wrong. I'm sure that someone will phonetically spell it out for me in the comments below. Um, Great little shmup. It was one of the few ones on the Xbox 360. It's unfortunately, like, I only have it digitally. I can't recall if it's got a physical copy or not. But it's a great little like vertical style shmup, and you can turn the television into a portrait mode, or Tate, or whatever you want to call it.
Nice.
And I actually have a uh, a smaller television, when I can eventually build the full game room, where it is specifically set up to be vertical and stuff, because the vase and mount holes are just wide enough and just perfect enough to be able to either put the screen one way or the other. And of course, I'm going to do that and just have as much screen real estate as possible while playing the game. But good, like, clubbing style soundtrack, a little bit of a bullet hell and stuff. Great, wonderful artwork, but it's only an honorable mention. The next one is Luminous Arc 2. on the DS. Uh, this is one of those things where the cult of Final Fantasy Tactics discovered it. And it was just a beautiful game. The first game was awesome, and multiplayer and versus multiplayer and stuff like that. And just another strategic tactical turn-based game where you're walking around on a grid. Second game, more of the same. You know, same song, second verse, all, but it got so much better. The story got deeper. The characters were more fleshed out. You Most people who play the second one have played the first one and just dive deeper into it. But again, that's not my lock on that one. Uh, my lock was Star Wars: The Force Unleashed.
Hell yes. Hell yes.
And it's an odd story. Like, I enjoyed the game and played it and collected all the different kinds of lightsabers and figured out how to do all the mean styles of combat and stuff. And I played through the game twice. The first time as the good guy, the second time as the bad guy and stuff. But it was like the first real like conversation with with a kid that eventually became my stepson. Because I was dating my wife back then, and we were talking back and forth about video games and stuff. And we were both playing Force Unleashed at the same time. And we were, trading back and forth. Oh, where did you get this lightsaber? I got it over here. Well, have you tried this type of force power and stuff? And it was just more of a, like, the game is great and stuff, but the thing that added to it was being able to connect to him and make that connection with him over this game.
Yeah, man, that's so crucial. And like we were talking about earlier, those are the things that you can't really, the video games are so great at bridging any of those sort of gaps. And they're great for those ice breaking moments. It's something that, especially, he was probably early, younger kid at the time.
Yeah, about 17 or so. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking about almost all, whatever, 12 to 18 and over, young dudes are growing up playing video games. So that's an instant sort of bonding thing where you've been a lifelong video game fan. So it's just those stories are freaking, they're freaking epic. But even on the mechanics for Star Wars Force Unleashed, I think that's an underrated game that people just act like those force powers were easy to pull off in development. I can't imagine how arduous and difficult it was to animate all those different kills and animate all those different moves. And like, the game had a lot of a lot to do with those force powers. And I talked about Jedi Outcast earlier, and they have force powers, but what they did with the Force Unleashed was way, way, way next level, way next level. But this is
Definitely.
This is 2008, right? I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Okay,
2008.
2008. All right. So I have the Force Unleashed on mine as well. I think the Force Unleashed is a great game. It's an honorable mention, but honorable mention to Saints Row 2, playing that right now. And I definitely am finding a new appreciation for that. I've always loved it, but appreciating it even more. Metal Gear Solid 4. Yeah, it's not on the level of 3, 2, and 1, in my opinion, but great game. Fallout 3 made me fall in love with Fallout. And after Fallout 3, I fell out of love with Fallout. So shout out to Fallout. Number 1 for me is Dead Space, the OG. And Dead Space, man, it took from the mold of Resident Evil 4, like we're talking about, that over the shoulder third person shooter, lining up the sights, taking apart your enemy. And I love, this is going to make me sound like a sadist or whatever, but I love dismemberment in games. I love taking apart enemies' limbs one by one, and then in Dead Space just smashing down on those things, stomping down. It's so rewarding. I love that game. I love the different weapons, cutting shit in half with the little saw blade thing. I forget what it's called, but damn, man, such a fun horror title. The first time I played through was 2 years ago, actually, or last year, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know.
It's actually on my backlog.
Oh man, you're not a
I've
big.
got 1, 2, and 3, and it's on my backlog and stuff. And I'm like looking off to the side, staring at all of my Xbox games and stuff. And it's like, yep, there it is. Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2, Dead Space 3. And I think
Yeah,
like what the fourth one or something like that was like on the Wii or
yeah,
something. Or
they had,
there's like some Dead Space game on the Wii.
yeah, like Extraction or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, but yeah, well, 1 and 2 are absolutely brilliant. You're not the biggest horror fan, are you?
not so much. My wife is the horror fan, and she just started discovering like things that, oh, there's a Saw video game, and
Yeah.
there's this, and there's that, and so she's like, that made her ears perk up. Like, oh, really? There's like horror based, like, and so like, um, she's interested in the Quarry and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yes, dude, that would be perfect for y'all.
so I've got to go pick one of those up, and like one of those style of games, and just sit her down in front of the PlayStation 5 and in front of the 4K television and just let her have at.
Yes, dude, that's such a great game for couples. And those are earlier ones, Man of Medan, Little Hope, and then House of Ashes. Those are probably so cheap at this
Yeah.
point. So you could just grab one for freaking $5-10 and be on your way, and then wait for the Quarry for holiday season. It'll probably be back down to $20 or something like that, $30. Run into the good old Quarry. But yeah, man, Dead Space, it's one I would definitely recommend, even just for you. I know you really enjoy shooters and third person shooters. Like I know you're playing Alien, Fireteam Elite and stuff like that.
Oh
It
yeah.
it's just such a good, even despite the horror, it's scary. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you, but despite the horror, just a damn good third person shooter. But on into '09, right? Yeah, '09. What we got
So
for '09?
I'm actually going to break into a different story about horror games and stuff.
Okay.
Uh, my first playthrough of Resident Evil on the original PlayStation, I was doing it during a thunderstorm,
Oh yeah.
and and I mean, like, this was rattling, like thunder that would rattle the glass on in the house
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff. And uh what is that thing? It's like the first big nasty thing that doesn't even look humanoid.
Are you talking
I'm
about like
blanking.
the very first reveal, the zombie that's eating the? Are you talking about Resident Evil One, the
No,
remake,
no, just normal Resident Evil 1,
or
like
the
the
Resident Evil
old
One?
school long box PlayStation 1 version. Like, I'd seen the dogs, I'd
Oh,
seen
okay.
the first zombie reveal. This is
This
like the thing that bursts through the door and starts hunting you. I want to say it's like a lictor or something like that, or I don't know.
that
Has the
the
huge tongue or
okay.
something.
Well, that would be RE2.
Okay,
Was
maybe
the
I'm misremembering, but it was the thing that was like very not human looking,
okay?
and it like it instantly put like a ton of urgency and fear in me. It's like, oh god, that thing's hunting me,
Yeah.
and then boom, power goes out.
Oh.
And I was like sitting there in the dark, like just staring, going, okay, that's enough of that for now.
Yeah. And it's a double whammy too, because it's a those are memory card save data days, so there
Yeah.
wasn't the auto save. So you're sitting there like, damn, I just suffered through the I suffered through all that shit, and now I gotta go back and play it.
And
Ain't no
resave.
chance.
Yeah. I mean, like back then it was they left a lot up to your imagination for horror games and stuff. And that's the true hallmark of horror is you can't nothing could scare you like your own imagination.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. All right, man. For 2009, what do you have for me cooking?
Uh 2009 was a big year for me. So there's a lot of games to kind of touch on this, but we're going to play a game on this one.
All
I'm
right.
going to mention all of the games and talk a little bit about all of them. And I'm going to let you try to guess which one is my lock for
Okay.
2009.
All right. All right.
Fantasy Star Portable on the PSP. Great game. Absolutely loved it. I loved Fantasy Star online, and this was a portable version that you could play on the PSP. You could play offline, you could play online, and it was, I mean, it was more of the same. I absolutely love it. Still, every once in a while, I'll boot it up and continue playing it. The Ghostbusters game, which has been now dubbed the unofficial third Ghostbusters movie, because of how it continues the storyline. You're the new rookie and you're running around like zapping ghosts, and you have to use the correct kind of beam and stuff. And there's more complexity to the proton pack now. And shout out to the Alabama Ghostbusters, that are around and having fun. Um, Another game on the PSP, Dissidia Final Fantasy. Really odd style fighting game where you would press up to close with someone and press down to actually like run away from them and stuff. And just, it was great. It was very cinematic. You could dash in on someone and get a bunch of strikes in and stuff, and then dash back out as soon as you thought they were going to be able to counter you or break out of stuff. Raiden 4 on the Xbox 360. Great shmup. Raiden's a classic. Uh, Always loved getting the purple lightning so that it would like run around the screen and like auto target the enemies and stuff, and always trying for good high scores. Batman Arkham Asylum, probably one of the best like hand-to-hand combat games that I've ever experienced. That counter system, the turn around and throw the batarang and then do this and do that, and just having competitions with friends about trying to see who could get the highest combo. Great thing. Uncharted 2, waking up in the train.
Oh
That's
man,
all I gotta say, right?
that's all you got
Waking
to
up in the
say.
train and just going, oh no, what has gone wrong here?
Yeah.
And then you backtrack to see how you got to this. Wonderful storytelling. Uh, Definitely put it over the top. I know that Uncharted 2 is probably almost everybody's favorite. I still had a couple of issues with the engine, but which is why 3 is my favorite. But again, wonderful game. Can't say anything too negative about it whatsoever. So that's all of them.
Okay, so based off of, we're going with some context clues here because I think I might have picked Uncharted 2 before you brought up the engine, but I do understand your critique with it. I'm gonna say Arkham Asylum.
You got it.
Arkham Asylum. Okay,
Arkham
nice.
Asylum was my lock. I
Well, yeah,
I
yeah,
felt like Batman playing the game.
absolutely,
It just
absolutely.
it was the most immersive experience I had ever gotten in a video game, where it was just like, no, 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 you don't understand. You become Batman. The game pulls you in so hard and pulls you in so deep that it's like you start thinking like Batman. It's no longer like you playing a game. It's the game is damn near training you to think like Batman, be like Batman.
Yeah, it's so, you know, like even the Metroidvania aspects of that game, of like using the asylum as its own like little character, and you're having to learn, the different paths, and it introduces that kind of horror element as you're, it's, I'm not trying to compare everything to survival horror here, but it does have slight horror elements where you're learning the environment, you're having to backtrack a little bit, understand your surroundings, and as everyone says, it makes you feel like Batman, but they say that for a reason, because that was the first game that really brought you into, like, Spider-Man 2 is still probably my favorite superhero. Well, I don't know. It, Arkham Asylum might be my favorite superhero game of all time, if I'm being totally honest. And it is because Spider-Man 2, PlayStation 2, as great as that game was for its time, you can still detach from it and go, okay, yeah, I'm playing a game that's way, 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 things aren't lining up the way they are in Arkham Asylum, where when you get into that flow, once again, talking about that flow state in games of catching the enemy's leg as he's coming in for a kick, tripping up the enemy next to him, throwing his shoulder, throwing an elbow, like you really were feeling like freaking Batman. And I don't care how cliche that may sound, you really felt like freaking Batman. It was so impressive what they were able to do with that character, especially in 2009. We're not talking about a modern game, really.
Yeah. And to justify the whole like horror, survival horror thing that you were talking about, it is a little bit survival horror because like Batman, okay, he's got all of his gadgets. Wait a minute, in this game he doesn't have all of his gadgets.
Yeah.
And now you're strapped for resources. You don't know if you're going to be able to do everything that he's normally ready to do.
Yeah.
And it's like he has to think like, okay, I've only got so much of this, or I don't have access to that yet because it's in the Batmobile and I have to like figure out how to get that in here and stuff. So like the restrictive resources adds to the fear and the stress of like the game, where it's like, I mean, it's not trying to like really stress you out, but it's putting that on top of you, that sense of urgency and
Absolutely.
stuff.
No
And
doubt.
that's how it kind of lends towards survival horror, much like ODST.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even just from that first moment where you're introduced, to like the Joker, and like it's very, very dark immediately, very dark. As you're going through the asylum, they have Joker strapped up and all that shit. Like it's just a dark opening to that game, and it's my game of the year for 2009 as well. I might have, no reason to belay
The
the
scarecrow levels. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I mean, there's Arkham City. We'll talk about Arkham City in a little bit, but that Asylum, Arkham City had my favorite boss fights. I'll just say that. But as an overall package, Arkham Asylum, it's my favorite Batman game of all time. And now that I'm really thinking about it, maybe my favorite friggin' superhero game ever made. It really, really impressive what they were able to do, what Rocksteady was able to do at that time. Honorable mentions for me, real quick: Origins, Dragon Age Origins, Uncharted 2, Infamous, and Bayonetta. I'm just going to throw those out there real quick, and we'll jump on to 2010. I agree with pretty much everything you said about Uncharted 2. So yeah, I don't have a ton to add there. Dragon Age Origins, I will say, such a freaking masterpiece, such a
Oh yeah.
masterpiece. And I'm not going to dive too deep into Infamous, because I will be diving deep into another Infamous game soon here. Hey guys, hope you all enjoyed part one of that conversation. We will be covering 2010 on up to 2021 in the next video. So stay tuned, subscribe, all that good stuff if you are interested in catching part two of that conversation. Taking me a little bit to edit it up. We were trying to record for like an hour or two. It ended up running, over 3 hours. So I'm trying to chop it up and then, put the gameplay clips and the trailers and all that shit in there. So it's a little bit more enjoyable for those of you who are watching it. So yeah, just give me a little bit of time on part two. I'll maybe try to, drop them like a day apart from one another, but part two definitely coming. So for any of you who enjoyed that, make sure to stick around and subscribe. And I'm sure most of you are watching it well after the fact. And if you are, everything will be listed down below in the description. So you can just quickly jump to part two with the click of a damn button in the description, through the power of the beautiful internet. But yeah, man, I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your comments on some of your favorite games throughout the decades. But yeah, until next time, guys, goodbye.